everyone. Welcome to the Comics Who Show.
Well, hey everybody, welcome back. This is our second issue, or second episode as you call it. So great to see everybody. I'm Kurtis Fujita. I'm a Kung Fu instructor. I'm the head instructor of Tiger Crane Kung Fu. I'm also a comic book artist and also worked in video games, animation, things like that. I'm currently the creative director at Silverline Comics and the creator of the upcoming comic book Shadow Ghost, the Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master.
I'm Patrick Lugo, former art director at Kung Fu Tai Chi magazine, illustrator, author, mostly of articles and movie reviews, and comic creator.
So, keeping in the spirit of all things that are Kung Fu, but also that are comic book and comic book pop culture, including comic book movies, we wanted to talk about the Venom sequel, Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Did it ever irk you? Because I haven't seen this sequel. I saw the first one. And I understand legality and licensing and agreements and all that kind of stuff aside, but it did kind of bother me that they weren't able to have Venom originate within the Spider-Man universe proper. I know they're trying to kind of knit it together between Sony Pictures and Marvel Studios and all that kind of stuff. But to me, Venom is from the Spider-Man universe, and his character, the symbiote, to me always should go through Peter Parker first. But I don't know. That's just how I feel. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would tend to agree. You can kind of see the skeleton. When writing my reviews, I definitely had to devote some time into really spotlighting a lot of the marketing dynamics that were around that spawned a character like Venom. Like the 90s were very much about those extreme cool anti-heroes, and Venom is such a good example of it. But then the fact that Venom, that black and white costume, was just born out of a toy line for the Secret Wars miniseries of the 80s, and it's like so like Venom has just been a character that's just been one marketing plan stacked on another marketing plan stacked on another marketing plan, and so that seems to hold true for the movie as well, where it's just all about trying to make the most out of that, that IP.
No, definitely. That's a very good point. And I it's always funny. When I was working in the comic book industry, it was in when I'm from Malibu Comics, I was working in the 90s, mid to late 90s, and it was just so funny. We used to have spreadsheets of just different character names. If anybody wanted a character, they could look up, these character names. Everything was blood and death, blood, death, dark blood, and that was like all the books. Then it was like one of those three words: death, blood, and dark had to be somewhere in there, right? And so it's just so 90s,
Oh yeah, and that's after they, run out of the various single word nouns as a name, of which Venom, Spawn, Cable, and a handful of others are all just built around, Gone are the days of Amazing Man,
Yeah. And then I remember they would actually just spell things wrong. Like if somebody had the rights to Blood Wolf, BLOOD, Wolf, it would be BLUDD, Wolf, right?
Right.
Oh, I think I see our guest coming in. So.
All right, Kurtis, I wanna introduce you to someone special, our guest today. He's someone that I've worked with in the past. We've he's a stalwart member of the Kung Fu Wu Lin, right? The Kung Fu Forest. So let me introduce you to José Figueroa. Maybe you could give us and our vast audience of a handful, a little introduction of who you are, where you've been, and how you ended up here.
Well, my name is José Manuel Figueroa, originally from Santurce, Puerto Rico. Basically proud Boricua, been a part of just doing interesting work with Tai Chi, I guess. And I think my claim to fame has been really having a great teacher that came from China at a certain time that I was very interested and physically able to do Tai Chi. And in that process of learning this traditional discipline, I was able to contribute, along with my Kung Fu brother, Stefan Berwick, some really great information to help facilitate teaching Tai Chi in North America, and I think that's one of the things that I personally loved about the discipline itself is what it provided for me on all planes, but also what it was able to provide for young people in the public city schools of New York City. So that was one of the things that we did. We wrote a book called the Tai Chi for Kids. Tuttle Publications did a really wonderful illustrations, with the hardcover kind of booklet. And the goal was to get that into every public school in North America. But the physical aspect of doing that by yourself, not having enough people, it get daunting. But shout out to actually a company named Scan New York, the Supportive Children's Advocacy Network. They were like a not-for-profit that did work with special needs families and people that needed help. And Lou Zuckerman was the executive director of the company. Renee Avery was my boss, and they just allowed and facilitated some really amazing things with Tai Chi. And it started with just Tai Chi, but then it became something bigger. And what we was doing in Harlem, it was bringing a collective of martial arts of all styles onto a stage filled with 600 kids, like screaming, because they're watching a lion dance, on stage. And we were introducing them to Chinese culture. There was capoeira. There was a little bit of everything. And Scan New York was behind all of that. Lou was one of the guys that facilitated that. And at one point, I even was able to bring in my Tai Chi, the Yang style master, Master Derek Trent. And I brought him with Master Ren Guang Yi, my Chen style master. And there was a big Tai Chi performance with both styles on stage. And it was really magical,
Right. But we kind of just jumped into the middle. I want to hear a little bit about the early Jose when he was just young. First, I'm sure you were watching Black Belt Theater like the two of us were when we were kids.
Absolutely. Actually, when I came from Puerto Rico, I was around 8 and something. And but my kids, I grew up in Puerto Rico with my grandmother. My brothers grew up in New York with my parents, and so I didn't really get to connect with my brothers until I was around 8ish or 12, or I can't even remember. But I know when I got to New York, I speak English. I spoke only Spanish. I didn't understand English. So it was a very culture shock for me. As I got further along, my brothers, embraced me, what have you, and I assimilated into Western culture. Cut to music. I'm listening to bomba plena, percussion music in Puerto Rico, and I hear this little bodega like around the corner in the neighborhood, and it turns out it's like a little candy shop. And my best friend at the time, that he became my best friend, was a guy named Jojo Santiago, right? So basically, Jose Santiago, but his name is Jojo, nickname, and later he became the founder of the Rocksteady crew.
I just want to say that I'm very happy to see something like this. Where I come from, we didn't have these opportunities. I did it in the streets where the cops were driving by and things were happening and you had to get out of the way. But I like the fact that you got this unity. I was just feeling everything that was going on here. You're a very good teacher, man.
They here, rocking it.
What happened in the 70s is the dance itself was developing. Everything was very pure and organic.
We kind of took what we saw and we kind of like played with it and added a few more gymnastic moves and more acrobatic moves. The other inspiration was Kung Fu movies. Like every Saturday we go to 40 Doo-Wop, 42nd Street in Times Square, and we spend all day watching 6, 7 Kung Fu movies.
Sometimes we would imitate how they fought and kind of utilize those methods in the way we moved without dancing, but with a different kind of rhythm. And then there's also the idea of being Puerto Rican and utilizing the dance steps from salsa, mambo, and things like that have a direct influence on us because we are Puerto Rican, Dominican, Cuban, whatever.
And so we were like first generation Rocksteady crew B-boys, and he was my first mentor, as part of that. And, we went to this karate school called Davidson Community Center Karate School. And, we had an interest in martial art, and we had an interest in hip hop. And for me, that's always something that really always connected, really kind of linked up in a really cool way. And so JoJo, cut into like present day, we ran into each other through a mutual friend, a guy named Warrington Hudlin, who's a huge fan of martial art. He has something called the Fist and Sword series at the Museum of Moving Image, and he facilitated a reunion with myself and JoJo, and we did a presentation on the effects of hip hop and kung fu, both in cinema and Shin Ka, a friend of ours, he was a film guy, Asian brother from New York City. He came through. All the Rocksteady crew fellas came through. We showed the movie True Legend, and I'm gonna tell you, man, to have the Rocksteady crew guys watching that movie, and I've already seen the movie 100 times. But it was the perfect movie to show them because I'm a huge fan of Kung Fu and I'm a huge fan of hip hop. So in this movie, Jay Chow, right? There's a couple of characters that are doing it. He becomes a Tai Chi drunken master, the Sante monk, what have you, and he teaches some drunken style. And at the end of the film, David Carradine plays kind of this three-ring circus guy. And he has this group of wrestlers, Western wrestlers, fighting against this guy who later becomes, that monk. He's like, Wang Fei Hong, Feng Tai Yip, all those types of characters. And Donnie Yen played him as this particular character in Beggar So. So anyway, he's supposed to be this Beggar So. And in the middle of this fight, he breaks out and starts doing windmills, like breakdancing windmills. The audience reacted. You remember back in the days when we used to see kung fu movies, and it was that reaction, and they lost it, and Warrington was ecstatic about it because it's like that's what we love about kung fu movies, if they can make you feel that. And so True Legend was it's a mixture of Five Deadly Venoms meets this, had all these different layers, and people were fans. And but these b-boys, they were like old-timers b-boys, and they loved the hip-hop aspect of the film, and so did I. I loved that film for that reason. But that was an experience, and we documented it. It was JoJo and I, we reconnected. He brought his family, I had my family there, and Warrington is a patron of both cultures. We were able to really do some great work trying to cover that history. But the hip hop always kind of worked its way into what later was my interest, which was the Chinese martial art, and so Master Ren has been really a huge influence on me. But in addition to Master Ren, there's my Kung Fu brother, Stefan Berwick. And, we are a mutual friend of all of ours. And Stefan was, my mentor in more of the contemporary wushu, traditional long fist, basic weapons, and his background and training was with the Bosun Mark family, which is Bosun Mark herself, the mother of Donnie Yen, and Chris Yen, his Tai Chi sister, Kung Fu sister, and there are people that are the vanguards, for bringing, I would say, Chinese martial arts to Westerners in a way when it was inaccessible. They broke a lot of ground, and and one of the beautiful things that Bosun Mark also brought was the influence of Eastern art, stage, Peking opera, things that you would typically not see here in the West, and popularized it. And this is something I didn't know, but Stefan brought it up, and he mentioned that a mutual friend of ours, Fred Ho, he actually was a huge fan of Bosun Mark and what she was doing, and he adopted her philosophy, creating a production based on like the legends of Kung Fu, starting with the Monkey King. So it was this great concept with Su Wong Kong. It was this amazing theatrical production using jazz music as opposed to the traditional Chinese music. But he combined it. It was combined traditional Chinese music with jazz. So it was really avant-garde theater. And me, Stefan, etc., were a very interesting part of that. So the way it worked is Stefan introduced me to Fred Ho. And then later he told me that Bosun Mark was his influence. You know, I found that out years later. And then what the cool thing was that there was a love and a passion for Chinese martial art. Me, I was a huge fan myself, and we were at a production for Avon Davis Hall at City College of New York, and there was a show called Warrior Sisters, and it was a opera, right? A martial arts opera. And at the lead was a person, a group of Asian brothers names. The name of the group is Slant, Slant, right? And they were a stage performance trio that did like amazing work. You know, it was just great theatrical, but Fred Ho was again one of those mentors that we all looked up to him, and that was part of kind of the type of art that was coming out of Asian Americans that were, you know, tired of the stereotypes, and, you know, and they were creating a voice and artistry. So out of that group was a brother named Perry Yun, and Perry was the first guy that I worked with when we were doing a show at Lincoln Center in 1997, and it was the first rendition of what later became Voice of the Dragon, which is a martial arts ballet that Fred Ho produced, and Columbia artists toured it. It was a great production, and it was extremely rare for that to be the case. It was not a production that was produced in Asia. It was produced here, and it was with a combination of all the ethnicities coming together to make this one thing happen.
Jose, I was wondering if you could comment, because some of our viewers are more from the comic book world, not necessarily.
Oh, excellent! Yeah, yes.
And so the idea of Tai Chi, I teach Hongga, and I also do some Tai Chi. But even when I started, there's a very strong misconception, especially here in the West, about Tai Chi. Usually, when you say Tai Chi, most people think, oh, old people practicing.
Right, absolutely. I get that.
Martial art, they say, what type of martial art is this? But if you have a chance to investigate it, it's a phenomenal martial art. I don't know if you could kind of comment a little bit about that, educate everybody
absolutely.
about.
Would love to, actually. I personally loved Chen Tai Chi because of my personal feeling of it. You know, I loved aesthetically what it looked like, but then when you go deeper and you research and you do it more and longer, you understand it as the martial discipline. And in there's an array of techniques, a plethora of techniques that are based on locking. So this in this order, true Tai Chi boxing would be trap, lock, break, throw. In that order, not necessarily in that order, but it's more ideal in that way. So the trapping part would be, so think of a Roman Greco wrestler or a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu guy, and what they do on the floor, and that's actually the type of fighting you would do using Tai Chi principles, where someone, let's say, is trying to grapple or trap someone that, let's say, is a expert in the Tai Chi system, Chen style system. If you can think of a conveyor belt, it's a conveyor belt that's just kind of bringing the joint from the wrist to the elbow to the shoulder. And once you get through those conveyor positions, something's going to snap, right? And that's actually the design of the film, of the style, you know. And the same thing I explained with the arms applies to the knee, the hip, and the ankle. And then the spine and the central upper thoracic cavity, the lower lumbar, and the positioning of the body. As a martial artist, like any martial art, you know, it's all about footwork. You know, your footwork has got to be in the right places. So you're using your torso and your body as a lever to basically create a very forceful and powerful swai jiao throwing, which is a kind of a Chinese wrestling style that is not typical to only Chen Tai Chi, but it's actually one of its ancestors, connected. And you know, and I actually personally have an affinity for Hangga because there was a love of that system because of Gordon Liu. Like, I'm a huge Gordon Liu fan. So when I got to meet him in person, man, and he came to New York, he saw our show. He was ecstatic about a stage production that showed martial arts on stage. And of course, the jazz was phenomenal because he'd never seen anything like that. And we got lucky because he didn't realize that, you know how they pick people from the audience? They go, hey, we need somebody for the audience. And they put me in there with one of the guys that was in my show, and it was a bit, you know, he's going to show a technique in movies, you know, in the movies we used to do this, and he teaches me and my friend a technique, and it's a simple combination, and we do it easy, and he's excited because he says, wow, you guys pick up quick, And then somebody whispers in his ear, "Hey man, that's the choreographer for the show you just saw," and he was so cool about it. And so then we go outside and we interview him in front of the Brooklyn Academy of Music, right? And Roberto Lopez, who's one of my mentors in filmmaking, he's under the Sammo Hung like lineage. He's one of those Colombian brother that loved Chinese martial arts like I did, and he got in with the right circles. But he happened to be there at that day. It was like a bunch of martial arts people came to this, and he filmed me interviewing Gordon. And it's a beautiful interview, man. And he says some great things. One of the things that he was a huge fan of Bruce Lee. He had a huge respect for Bruce. He had good reasons, and actually I agree with every single one of them. And then when we talked about Crouching Tiger, he kind of like thought about it. He said, I've seen it, I liked it, but like we've done this movie before, like several times. And he wasn't wrong, and we're fans, so we know exactly what he meant, and shout out to Bay Logan, man, the sequel to Crouching Tiger. I actually absolutely loved. I loved the location, the way they did it. It was a great homage to the original. It had a very different tone, which it was supposed to, but it was one of those things that these types of wuxia films, I know that I fell in love with martial arts because it was a magic of Asia, that was connected to it, and the culture, and there's a beauty that's there, that and a history and the preservation of that history and that ancestry. And I think when it comes to all people of color that have some type of a history, Boricuas, people from Africa, we have this respect for ancestry and preservation of that history. And when that's taken away from you, and you have to kind of research it to get it back, that becomes there's a disparity in that type of knowing yourself. So for me, the Tai Chi and Chinese martial arts in particular help to fill that void, for many people who have lost some connection, because there is a family hierarchy in Chinese martial arts that I absolutely adore, Tai Chi Go, Daga, Big Brother, like I love that whole aspect of the culture. And one of the really great friends of ours that God rest his soul that he passed was the rock and roll singer Lou Reed, who was a huge fan of Chen style Tai Chi, and just really a great practitioner himself. He really kind of devoted himself to the art form, but Lou also understood the hierarchy, man. This is how cool Lou Reed is, man. My teacher did a presentation at Carnegie Hall, and he was the first time ever a Chinese martial arts presentation on the stage of Carnegie Hall, and they were playing rock and roll with Lou Reed and my teacher performing Tai Chi, and it was this great show that they did. We go backstage, Ruben Blades, Bridget Belzer, and these are all people that were backstage. And Lou was introducing me and Stefan as his brothers, like, oh, these are my Tai Chi brothers. But he's like so proud of that, man. And and we're like almost embarrassed about it, because we're like, oh man, we're like, like, oh Lou, man, you're being like too generous, and so he's introducing to all these, and it was just the coolness about that. He knew he was down with something that was very special. And Master Ren preserved this very interesting history because of his teacher, Chen Xiaowang, Grandmaster Chen Xiaowang. And there's this really interesting history that he was trying to maintain and preserve here in the West.
Well, I think it's always, no matter what style, at the higher level, there's so much
connection. Absolutely.
So much connection. Right. And that's why I always tell my students that there's no superior styles. Styles are languages. No language is superior than another language. It's just how do you want to express yourself, right?
Right, absolutely.
My Sifu YC Wang, he's known for having really good Hongga, but then people sometimes will see his Tai Chi and say, well, why is he doing that Tai Chi stuff? And what they don't understand is one of the reasons his Hongga is so good is because he investigated Tai Chi.
Yeah. Cut to 20 years later, Warrington Hudlin introduced me to this young brother that was doing a film that I was working on. And he said, you two should work together on this movie because it's about Chinese martial arts and Black folks and Latinos and their interest in the subject. And the way the movie came about was because Fred Ho, my mentor, asked me a question. And he was like, Jose, what is it about Chinese martial arts specifically that Latinos and Blacks just love? What is it about this stuff? And I was like, that's a good question. And I went down the list of what I loved about martial arts, etc. And that thesis, like 2-3 page written piece that he was going to publish in some type of academic journal, It never got published, but it became the blueprint for a movie that we ended up doing called Urban Dragons. And it was called Blacks and Latinos in Chinese Martial Arts. And it just features a plethora of people that have been doing Chinese martial arts and their stories and the journey of, how this changed our lives, in some way, shape, or form. And Stefan Berwick is a part of that. Is a brother named also Tyre Cassell, one of the first African American guys to be doing Chinese martial arts before anybody thought it was cool. Like he was fighting against karate guys, like in his Tai Chi or Kung Fu uniforms. And, he was legit like a hero, And then other people came, like Philip Redman, who does Wing Chun. He actually was a fan of also, and he mentions him in the documentary. And he had some great stories because he's ex-Marine, And then he has a student named Rashawn Herkel, and I get to meet both of them. And when you have a teacher-student, it's shifraturi, it's a teacher-student relationship, it's unbreakable. They have the best bond I've ever seen. Like that respect is, and there are other masters, I think that love these traditions and preserve them. But it's basically almost like, when you're an older man, but your mind is like a kid. Like and I'm not saying that in a disparaging way. I'm saying it in a really good way, that you have imagination. There's a brightness in your eye, and Kung Fu does that for us, I think. There's something about that magic, that youthful, and it preserves a certain, I don't know. That's what it does for me. That's how I would speak to it, But
since we're talking Tai Chi, what comic book character, superhero or villain, what's a character that would use Tai Chi?
That's a good idea. Let me see. In terms of philosophy and mindfulness, right? Doctor Strange.
Oh yeah,
Doctor Strange. In terms of what he has to do, the alchemy, knowing formulas, knowing the philosophy. There's that metaphysical aspect that Tai Chi is known for, which I don't like. Where you could send someone 20 feet with just thinking about it. Like, no, that's not how it works. That's not how the force works. That scene with Harrison Ford. And that's sort of my take on the Tai Chi. It's like, no, it's not magical. There's real physics behind it. Every discipline has the same physics. The expression of it is unique. There's something about the magic of that. And so when I see Doctor Strange, doing what he's doing, he's got to think so quickly to make all these things happen instantly. And that's sort of how you have to think in Tai Chi. It's like playing a very quick game of chess, and you're moving, so Doctor Strange would be my go-to superhero.
He is a master of mystic arts, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
We've segued into comics. I know you also have a little bit of a connection with that too, with a certain comic that titled, well, there's two, but the first one I should mention, right, is your comic Shadow Lords, as well as the other comic Black Salt, but we can get to that one next. Well, discuss them both.
Well, I'm definitely going to talk about both of them because my brother, Owen Ratliff has this. I would say if I had to describe him, it's like the Black James Bond, but written that way. It's not like how they had James Bond and they said, well, let's just insert another actor into that role. Like he created a character that had a Shaolin background. There's this big, great origin story, and the comic book just really captured that and he broke it into 4 different comics, and eventually it became, or it will become, a graphic novel. And a feature film, he actually did this mini feature that Ben Ramsey directed, and I love Ben Ramsey's Blood and Bone, and so I'm a huge fan of his work. And to know that he was directing the film, Arnold Chung did the action, so he had this great acrobatic stuff. And later on, these guys all went on bigger and better things, man. But Black Salt started with this comic book concept idea of a black superhero / secret agent, saying Samuel Tharp, and this character is kind of like the Black Salt part of it is that he ended up in China. I don't want to give away too much of the plot points, but it's a comic book that's worth a really good read, and it's independently produced, and the owner, creator, Owen is also my partner with Shadow Lords and all the stuff that I'm working on. So whatever films we work collaboratively, we're trying to package these things to get some information out about these independent types of comic books, and and ways of getting them either to publishers or saying, hey, we want to take our published material and use the intellectual property to turn it into a film or a video game or a role play game, or so there's ways of merchandising it and packaging it. And Owen is just a genius at that. He's been able to synthesize a really interesting platform to promote the brand of Black Salt, and the nice thing about it is also there's a video game that he put together. It's just amazing. Like the graphics are great. And then he got connected somehow with Wu-Tang. Like the Wu-Tang Clan, there's this thing with the sneaker. There's like a one-of-a-kind sneaker. And he has the Black Salt thing connected to something else. And Wu-Tang and RZA came through, and they liked the track so much. They say, you know what, let's throw RZA in there. And they recorded like this cool little music video where RZA's going to be featured. And it's kind of like hip-hop kung fu culture. If anyone is that, you remember your magazine had him on the cover with Chi Young Man, and it was great. It was a great article, But see, those stories, man, these are people that are legit fans of comic books and fans of martial art, and that's sort of what I think Owen was able to capture with this character. It's a really cool concept. And mine is more of a Tai Chi master kind of thing. So you got a Shaolin trope with Black Salt, but the Tai Chi one is, imagine Lao Tzu and Sun Tzu. Like if they had a temple, and the temple's called the Sanctuary of Enlightenment, and as teachers, one of them is hardcore Shaolin, the other one is very gentle, very Tai Chi, like, the way Tai Chi is known. And in there, they have these 8 children that they have to train, and they have to teach them certain things about martial art, and then they have to train those kids at a certain age. And if you're set in your ways and you're hard-headed, whatever, and now you got to be gentle, and it's not going to work. So it's kind of like this interesting. And so what I ended up doing is I wanted to tell a story that would show them as children. So I had an animated TV series to do that story. Then for the adult part of the film, that would be the feature film, Shadow Lords, which is based on the actual graphic novel. And in that graphic novel, they're already adults. So there's no backstory about them as young kids. But the goal for me would be to always do the kids' story in a really cool animated way, and as a comic book. But the actual full featured comic, Bo Wilkins was the leader of the production. He has a great team behind it, him and his wife, Rachel. They've been doing this comic book with me since, I like to say, 2005. And it's been a work in progress, a labor of love. We're all putting sweat equity into this stuff. Me and Owen have been doing this stuff forever. And, as independent filmmakers, as independent film and comic book publishers, you're trying to kind of get a story out that appeals to what your love and interest is. It's kind of like what you're doing with your work, that there's a passion for art, but there's also a combination of art, mixed with martial art. And there's some philosophies in there that you can tell. And, the age group that you're targeting, man, that's an important age group. And that's one of the things that I did kindergarten through 8th grade in the Board of Education. That book would have flied off like the handles because, I could see that being in the lesson plan, life lessons. Kung Fu is all about life lessons, man. And, and I think kids are missing, that the importance of that. And not that sports doesn't teach that, because I'm a fan of Western sports. But there's also this Western culture that's a little too aggressive, too hyper masculine, and there's no humility behind that masculinity. And I think what makes martial arts unique is that ability that we have to be able to be humble, even in the face of adversity, and being able to check ourselves, because we know that the training that we've done, you could actually hurt someone doing this stuff if you choose to lose it. And I think when you have comic books that address that, or movies that address that there's always this restraint for that reason.
Well, no, I was just going to say, what Jose was elaborating on earlier about the difference between Kung Fu and just kind of the Western sports kind of dynamic that we're all brought up with, is the thing that's so beautiful about Kung Fu is because it's so much about self-discovery, is this concept that for me to win doesn't mean you have to lose. And that's
I love that. Yeah.
Right. And when you say humility, I mean, that's one of the biggest things my Sifu used to say. And it's like, when you say that is Kung Fu, right? It's having the ability to do these potentially destructive things, but having the restraint not to, right? Power is not good without restraint. It's useless. And I always feel like that's where bullying comes in, right? A bully is what happens when the coward gets power, right?
Yes,
That's
right.
actually, maybe before we shut the whole thing down, maybe we can go around and everybody can kind of give their social media and where people can contact you and stay updated on your projects. Maybe we'll start with Jose. Maybe you could share where people can find you online and kind of keep track of all your very.
This is the year that I'm going to kind of launch a lot of my social media platforms. But at this time, it's going to be just strictly Facebook. But eventually, I'll have a specific website on Facebook that's strictly Shadow Lords, the comic book. And actually we'll launch that. But at this point, it's Jose Figueroa on Facebook, and you'll see I'll usually post stuff about martial arts. I share a lot of other people's work and what have you. And that's for now the only platform that I can kind of put the word out on.
Okay, great. And we'll be happy to share once the Shadow Lords websites up. We'll share it on our social media.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I'll have all that in place. A lot of it is just building and working quietly to be able to express something physically later.
Absolutely.
We're manifesting.
Definitely. And Patrick, how about yourself? Where can people keep in touch with you and updated on all your projects?
Well, on the socials, I'm at Lugo, Plugo, or at Lugo Arts. You can find my website, plugoarts.com, and you should definitely keep an eye out for my graphic novel, A Tiger's Tale, where you can find updates at atigerstale.com, and that's tale spelled Tale.
Excellent.
Cool.
For myself, I found out about Linktree, so I'll put a Linktree with all the different links in the description. But the main things, for my Kung Fu school, we're teaching online courses now, so it's tigercrane.net and tigercrane805 on YouTube and Instagram. Thank you.
Love it. Yes.
Yeah. And for my comic book, it's Shadow Ghost Comic, one word. That's on Instagram and Facebook. So that's where you can find me. So without further ado, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll all see everybody next time.
Thank you, Patrick. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Kurtis.
Thank you, Chris.
Hello, I'm Sifu Kurtis Fujita with Tiger Crane Kung Fu. Just wanted to let everybody know that we do have an online program that we're utilizing, not just for our enrolled students that come to our physical location, but also for students who are in other states, other time zones, other countries. It's a unique program with multiple components that really help you learn Kung Fu and Tai Chi at home during the current health epidemic and beyond. So we have different components. The first part is, of course, Zoom classes. We have online Zoom classes that meet throughout the week for Kung Fu and Tai Chi. We also have a unique thing which we call our rerun program. And what that means is we record the Zoom classes and we have an archive of dozens and dozens of videos for you to access at any time, anywhere, as long as you have an internet connection. So if you missed a class, you can go ahead and follow along and check it out. Or if you want to remember something that was mentioned in class, you can go back and watch the rerun. It's an archive for all enrolled members. Also, we have personal videos. And what I mean by that is if you film yourself doing an individual technique, you can send it to me and I'll be happy to shoot my own video with a response detailing specifically what you want to do to improve the exercise and do it most efficiently. And lastly, we even have a social club component. And what that essentially means is, when you're at a gym or a martial arts studio, it's that sense of community, the ability to visit with your classmates, with your teacher after class to, socialize. So we have a social club meeting. So once a week after class, we have a Zoom session and we talk for a little bit and catch up with each other and socialize. So these are all the different components that make our unique online Kung Fu program. If you're interested, feel free to reach me at my email address. It's instructor@tigercrane.net. Again, instructor@tigercrane.net. We would love to see you in our online studio. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you, and take care.